Sketching with Susan's group, Christmas sketch, sketching a gnome. I was hanging out with Susan's group. I think it's more like an invitation. Some of her, I think her students, and some are just her friends. And it was a Christmas sketch. And she was showing us how to do gnome sketches. You could see some of the gnomes. Very, very good, some of them. And I just sort of hang out and took part after lunch. That was fun. And I hope she will invite me more to these sessions. Remember to follow her at olichstudio_travels. Well, what I did was I looked for a nice gnome picture on pexels.com. They are free to be used and you can donate to the creator as well. As usual, I sketch lightly based on the photo with my favorite Palamino Blackwing. Well, lightly because I don't really want my pencil line to show too much. Although I don't really mind it at all. I mean, pencil's just part of the sketch anyway, right? Remember, you're not looking to accurately reflect every nook and cranny of the gnome, but just looking for broad shape. The broad shape will give the mind's eye a good appearance of what the object is about. So I'm looking for the head, the nose, the hand, and the handle, and the whatever it is that the gnome is sitting on the snow. The shadow is important because shadow gives you the three-dimensional form of the gnome. So even as I'm drawing, I am thinking that I will not follow every single white dot on the head. It is going to be ridiculously difficult to dot every whites and so on. You could, if you really want to, you could be really careful and take care of all the lines and put all the whites and reds and so on and so forth. But of course, doing this in an hour or less, I presume you'll be doing this for like Christmas cards, right? After all, it's a Christmas time, and if you're thinking of sending cards to a loved one, nothing better than really sketching and painting on watercolor or whatever medium that you choose, and send a handmade card to a loved one. They will be well over the moon because it is handmade. It is a lot more meaningful. And of course, if you're going to sketch a lot of these, assuming you make 10 cards or whatever, you don't really want to spend hours on one. Maybe 30 minutes, a simple sketch, simple outline, and you are done. Just don't draw it, because if you do, it becomes too detailed, too complicated, and in fact, it becomes messy. So there we go, we start painting, and I start by looking at the shadow, put a dab, and very quickly dilute it down with water to just give it a sense of where I think the shadow is going to be. I don't even care about the local color, in this case the red hat. What I want is really just the shadow shape on the hat. That will remind me where the shadow is going to be, and that also helps with in some ways the creation of a three-dimensional feel for the hat. Shadows under the hat, to the ears and the arm of the gnome, and that also dropping in a few colors. The colors I'm using is permanent alizarin crimson, phthalo green, I believe it's a blue shade, and I splatter. Well, splatter as much as you can get away with is what I always say. A bit of cobalt blue as a shadow on the snow. Even when you look at snow, which is white, of course the local color of snow is white, you don't really want to use white. Well, because the shadows will always be either a purplish tint or a bluish tint. I choose a bluish tint here, even though the photo, as you can see, is slightly on the purple side. Splatter, 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 splatter as much as you can get away with. And a bit more shadow underneath the gnome, and also just to give it a bit of form. As you can see, the more you put down on the shadow, you will see some kind of a three-dimensional shape taking place on a piece of paper. It's kind of magic, isn't it? When you can create 3D out of 2D, that's always a lot of fun. So, you know, in this sketch, what I'm trying to do is just to make it feel immediate, feel fun, feel, you know, yeah, so not too tight and detailed. Here I'm using a bit of quinacridone gold to give it, I believe it's a leaf underneath the gnome. I think the photographer put a leaf underneath the gnome to give it a bit of texture. So, or maybe it's a feet, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. Well, a bit of red, I believe it's, I put in queen rose, dabble into queen gold, and that gives it a bit of that, you know, the shirt of a gnome as well as the feet of a gnome. Sometimes when I'm painting, the colors just explode because there's water puddle nearby. I let it explode, it's okay. Magical, well, you might call it accident, are the happiest thing in watercolor. If you try to control watercolor, you pretty much will ruin it because, you know, it has a mind of its own. You really need to have the water flow because it is watercolor. So you need to have lots of water and you need to have water do its job and not over control it. It is just not the way watercolor works. You cannot control watercolor. So here we go. I put in the hat. It's a combination of queen gold, a bit of lemon yellow, and dabs of queen rose, and maybe even for the darker side, a bit of permanent alizarin crimson. Where the greens are, they are mostly phthalo green, blue shades. So cobalt blue, a small dab of phthalo green in it to give it a bit of a, you know, like a variety for shaping up the gnome, and maybe even a bit of maple yellows to give it a feel, a bit of a skin tone to the nose, the hand, and so on. So that's basically what I was trying to do. So I continue to put a bit more shadows, a bit more darker. The really dark stuff made of you know, stronger phthalo green with a dab of permanent alizarin crimson in it. And as you can see, it's just, you know, continuing to shape the three-dimensional. I let the brush dance around. I don't really, you know, draw with it, or I don't really sort of, you know, put very, very strong shape down. I kind of just, you know, dance, and occasionally there are broken lines, and I think that's okay. That's really not an issue at all. Oftentimes we're so afraid of having broken lines, but actually broken lines are beautiful in its own right. So now I'm going to go in with a bit of a stronger, sort of darker in the shade type for the grass, or wheat, or, you know, whatever that is. And it's all just for variety. I'm going to try to differentiate between the part that is in the sunlight and the part where it is not. So I use a bit more yellow, a bit more lemon yellow plus queen gold to create the grass that's in the sun, and a few dab of the same in the second one, and very few, much fewer in the third one. That gives it the sense of you know, being in the shadow and being in the sunlight. Same color used for the pole that the gnome is holding, same color used for the nose, a bit of it, and also part of the leg or the leaf, and that goes into the back. I see a bit of the color, the same colors there as well, so just reuse that. Never fear to use the same colors throughout. I mean, sometimes you have one weird color in one spot on the sketch, it looks very odd. Color must have echoes throughout the whole painting. So if you use color in one spot, make sure you don't be shy in using the same color in other places, in other spots, just to give it a bit of harmony. Remember, the principle of unity and harmony comes from using somewhat of a similar color, somewhat of a similar sort of shape, or some kind of a visual language that is consistent throughout the sketch. So now I'm just going to be lazy. I'm just going to dab through the hat to give it a bit of a... Well, it's sort of drawing a broken lines throughout the hat to give it three-dimensional form. That's what I was trying to achieve. And same thing on the shirt, underneath the beard. Can't quite see the beard, so I have some intention to draw some lines later. You can see at this point, yep, I'm just going to, you know, draw with a very light cobalt, too light. So, you know, I'm going to maybe use a slightly darker colors to do that. But you see that later. A bit of shape on the underneath the head, a bit of shadows. All of this really just sculpting. I think of my painting as sculpting three-dimensional form using lines or using sort of broad shape. Basically just sculpting the two-dimensional piece of paper into three-dimensional form for the gnome. Splatter, splatter, splatter as much as you can get away with, as I always say. Now I wasn't very happy with the width, so I wanted to tie it up with a single shape, and that's what I did. I used a very light yellow / queen gold, and I tied the grass up. A bit more shadow on the stick, a bit more shadow here and there. A bit more shadow on the big nose. I think we are almost done, and that's it. I think we're done. Very good, happy. So write my name and a date. So if you like this sort of content that I make, do consider subscribe. It is very encouraging to me, and I hope it helps you in some way. If you're ever going to create Christmas cards, best wishes and good luck. Most of all, I do want to wish all of my audience here a very Merry Christmas 2020. May 2021 brings you more joy, peace, prosperity, and happiness. Take care wherever you are. Bye.